welcome to the ceiling fan installation. The first thing that we're going to want to do is kill the power to the fan. Now, one of two ways: we can go shut off the breaker, or we can kill the light switch. As long as you have the light switch off, you should be good, and you shouldn't have to shut off the breaker. But remember, always test your connections before you go to touch it, and unwire them and take your caps off. So, couple different sections to this that we're going to have to go through. First, we're going to have to take down our light fixture. So there's 3 screws on each side that we're going to have to remove to bring it down. Once we bring this down, there's going to be 2 little wires connecting up in the middle, connecting the light fixture to the motor. So what we're going to have to do is disconnect them, but we don't want to just pull down on it. We're going to have to hold it up there and disconnect them. So you can either hold it sideways and use 2 hands, or you can push it down with your thumb, push up with your thumb. Either way works. You just want to make sure that you're holding this. You don't want to let go of this fixture or it's going to come crashing down. So we can use a drill, a screwdriver, either one, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is. So, there's 1 screw. There's 2. And we got our 3rd screw. Now that I got it, I got my connections here in the middle. I got 2 of them. I need to disconnect. So I got the light fixture down. The next part we're going to have to take off is our blades. So there's a little 1-inch slot on this side. So we're going to have to spin each blade around and take the screws out. There's going to be 2 screws per blade. So I can insert it. This 1-inch slot will allow us to have access to the screws. And make sure you hold the blade as you're taking out your 2nd screw. So I'm just going to keep spinning my blades around till I can get them all off. There's 2. Three blades. And 5. Now that I got all my blades off, we're good to move on to the next part. So the next part is we're going to have to take our cover off here. Now, if we take our right screw off and just loosen our left screw on both sides, that's going to allow us to turn this and pop it down. You can take the screw out, left screw out all the way as well, but it's not necessary. And be sure while we're going through and doing this, you want to try not to touch the ceiling. You don't want to mark up, get dirty fingerprints all over their ceiling. If we do, then we're going to have to either try and clean it, which doesn't work most of the time, or we're going to have to pay to get it repainted. So we definitely want to avoid doing that. Now I can twist and pop my cover off. So, once we get the cover off, we got our motor and our mounting bracket left. Now the first thing we want to do is test our power to make sure that it's off. So we're going to put it to our hot wire, our black wire, to make sure that it's off. Alright. It's reading off that there's no power, so we are good to continue. Now, what we want to do now is take these wires and pull these wires out, and I'm going to spread them apart as I'm pulling them out. So, I got them nice and pulled out. The next thing that I want to do is I want to take my phone and get a good picture of how it's being wired in. You always want to spread that out and get a picture of those wires, because however it's wired up, we're going to have to wire it back up the same exact way. So depending how many switches it's wired to, it can either be, if there's 3 wires, there's going to be 1 switch. If the house line has 4 wires, a black and a red, rather than just a black that's hot, you have 2 hot wires, it's going to go to 2 switches. So depending how many lines you have through, there could be 2, 3 different switches that control the power to it, which means there could be 2 or 3 house lines that are tied into the fan. That means there could be up to 16 different lines up there, so there's going to be no way to tell how to wire it back together correctly without that picture. Because no matter how they're wired up to our switches, that's how we're going to have to wire it back. So if we miswire it, we're going to have to stay there and continue pulling out wires, reconnecting them until we get everything correctly matching to how it was when we first started the install. So to avoid wasting all that unneeded extra time, pull them apart, take a good visible picture of your different sections so you know how to wire it back up correctly. So now I can unwire it, and I'm going to spread my wires apart as I'm doing this. That way I'll just be able to pull it down. Got my ground here. Okay. Now I got my wires disconnected. My next step is I'm going to unmount this fan. Each fan is going to be mounted a little bit different. This fan has 4 bolts, 2 on each side. So this is going to unscrew, slide to one side, and then pop out. Other models, it's just going to hang up there on a hook and then hold up and fasten in as well too. There's also another model where it just free hangs up in the mounting bracket. It's just going to sit in there and swivel around. So each one's a little bit different, but the most important thing is you always want to secure it before you wire it. and vice versa. Unwire it before you unsecure it to take it down. That way you're not trying to hold that motor up there and disassemble those wires. So, now I can take my screws out. Okay. I got my mounting screws out. So now I'm going to be able to slide it to one side and then pop the other side down. Now, the only thing I got left to do is bring my mounting bracket down. So, there's going to be 2 screws on each side that are going up into the junction box. Then I'm going to have to unscrew. Want to be super careful with these screws. Use the correct bit or screwdriver. The head is a little smaller and you don't want to strip these screws out. Okay. So, we got our mounting bracket down. We got our junction box up here. Now, this is a plastic box which is normally rated for a light fixture. But I can see that it's screwed into the joist up here, which means it's going to support the weight of the fan. Normally, it's got to be screwed up into the joist such as this, or there has to be a metal junction box here. If there's a metal box, that means that it's rated for the fan. Or it has to be screwed into those joists. Sometimes, when we're going from a light fixture to a ceiling fan, it'll have one of those insertable joists in there. And with those, they just stretch across and sit across the rafters, so it gives you some place to mount that box in. So that box is mounted to that, it's not mounted to a stud. And a lot of those are not rated for ceiling fans. It cannot hold or support the weight of it. So with those, it's going to come down, droop down off the ceiling, which we don't want. So if you go to hang your mounting bracket or your motor up there and it flexes down away from the ceiling at all, that means that it is not rated to hold that ceiling fan and we cannot install it. So you want to be very careful to check that out when we're going from a light fixture to a ceiling fan. So make sure it's screwed into the joist, or it's a metal box that it's rated for it, and it's not one of those insertable ones. So, now that we got it down, we are good to start getting our new fan ready to put together. So, we got our new fan unboxed and we're ready to start installing. So, when we take it out of the box, our blades are going to come separate. We're going to have to assemble our blades. So a lot of them, we got our screws with our little rubber washers and our 2 blade parts. So we're going to have to assemble each one of these and put them all together. Now take note of the fan blade. Each side is a different shade. One's lighter and one's darker. So always remember to discuss with the customer which one they want showing. So, to construct it, we're going to insert it. And you want to make sure you are putting all the correct side on the same color so you don't have to go back and switch it around. So they're just going to screw in. Three screws on each blade. So, they're all going to come separate, and we're going to have to assemble each blade. Once we got all the blades assembled, we're also going to have our light fixture we're going to have to assemble. One, we're going to have to put our little pull strings on it. There are two pull strings, and you can do this at the beginning or at the end as you're assembling it. Either way don't matter. I normally construct all my parts that I need to first, so I can just hang it and mount it up there. So, for our light fixture, we're going to have to put each one on. We have our globe here itself, and then we have our little plastic nut. So this nut is going to insert inside this, and it's going to screw onto this. Screw onto our fixture. So I'm going to get it in there and tighten it on. Now when it gets close to the bottom, it gets kind of tight to turn it with my fingers. So what I do is I kind of twist it all as one. I grab the nut and I grab the globe and I twist them at the same time right at the end, tightening it all the way up. That way it's on there tight. The globe's not loose or moving at all. So, now that I got my fixture on there, I can put my bulb in. Okay. Got all my blades, my light fixture assembled, so now I'm good to start putting it back up there. So now we are good to start reassembling. So, we're basically going to go in reverse order from how we put it up, and depending on the model, sometimes between the different models, the process of how it goes up is going to be a little bit different, but this is the same fan we're putting up, so it's going to be the same as how we took it down. Now, since it's the same, I got my mounting bracket and I got my left screw screwed in a little bit to make it easier when I go to put my globe on. So, first thing is we're going to get our mounting bracket screwed up there. Now when we screw this on, we want to make sure that this is sitting nice and flush on the top of the ceiling. So, I'm going to insert it through the hole. Then I can line up my holes in my junction box. adjusting it. Make sure it's going to sit flat on the ceiling. Okay. So now we got her nice and tight in there. Now we are good to put our motor on. So we're going to slide our motor in one side and then slide it out. So I'm going to put my wires on the same side, my wires on my motor, as my house line, so that way it's going to make it easier to wire it. So we got one side in, now we got the other side in. We got our holes lined up, so we are good to put our screws back in. Okay. So we can get our screws up. We got one. Two. Three. And then I always tighten up with my screwdriver just to make sure they're up there good and tight. Alright, get our last one up there. Alright, now that we got our motor up, we can reference our picture if we need to and wire it up. But always secure that mounting bracket in place first before you try and wire it up. You want to make sure that's secure and it's not going to fall before trying to wire it. So, on my fan, I got a black wire and I got a blue wire. So my blue's going to go to my white, my light, and my black is going to go to the fan. So our blue and our black wire are going to go together because they both have to wire up to our hot wire, our black wire. So we got black and blue to be wired up with black. it tight until you're done twisting and it can't twist anymore. Now we can give a little tug, which we gave a little tug and that one popped out. So that's why we always want to give a little tug to make sure that it's completely tight. And it wrapped around and tightened up how it's supposed to. Alright. So that one's a good connection. Then we got our white wire, our neutral, and my fan one, I'm just going to twist my wires all the way to the right. That way they form together. That way it makes a nice, good, even connection when I go to put my wire nut on. Alright, that one's good. And then I got my ground. So, now we got our ground to tighten on. Get that tightened on, give it a little tug, make sure it's good. Now that I got all these wired up, now what I want to do is make sure I can tuck these up in this bracket here. I either want to tuck these up in this bracket or make sure that they are tucked up into the junction box. Either one is going to be completely fine. Either way, it don't matter. But we want to make sure that it is tucked up in here. And remember, try not to push on your wire cap because you do not want your wire to pop out. But we want to make sure it's tucked up inside the top, because if not, if it's loose and it can hang down, what it's going to do is come down and hit the motor here, and it's going to make a clanking sound. So as the blades go around, it's going to go clank, 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 and you're not going to realize it till you're all finished with it, which means you're going to have to disassemble it and do the whole thing over again. So double check and make sure that you got those wires tucked up in there. So our next step is to get our cover back on. So we got our 2 left screws on already. So we're going to be able to slide this up. Get it inserted on both sides and then turn. Turn and twist it. Now, I don't want to tighten those 2 screws up yet. Not until I get my other 2 screws in. Alright. Got that one on. That hole's lined up too. Now I can tighten my others. Alright. Now I got my cover on nice and tight. Now I can reassemble all my blades. So, get my screws for my blades. And remember, we got that little 1-inch slot there where we're going to be able to insert our blades up through to be able to mount them. Now, you can either try and put the screw through and then try and put it in the hole. Some people do it that way. Or how I do it, I hold it up there so that way I can see my hole and line up my hole. Once I know that my hole is lined up, then I can put my screw in. So, get my screw ready. So then I can hold my blade in. Alright. Got one. Now I'm going to have to adjust it to line the other hole up. Continue. Sliding around and getting my blades put on. Trick is you want to try not to apply too much pressure to where your blades are going in, because if you do, that's what's going to keep making it spin around in there. And it's going to continue to spin as you're putting your blades on here. So you got to kind of hold it and work with it. Hold it and work with it. It takes a little bit getting used to. But once you figure out how to keep it still, you'll be good to go. So now we got 3 blades on. We got 1 left. That one wasn't going in right, so we'll give that one another try. There we go. Okay. Now, once I got it tight, I'm going to take my screwdriver and go around and hand tighten them all, just to make sure that they're all nice and tight. Alright, now that we got them all tight, we are good to put our light fixture, our last and final piece on. So since we've already put our globes and our light bulbs on, this is the only portion left that we got to put on. Now, we're going to have to hold this fixture up in place to get our screw in. So make sure that we have this facing the right direction. If it's correct, all our holes are going to line up. But if we have it opposite backwards, it's not going to line up. So we got a circular slot and we got a square slot on each side. So make sure your circular slot is going to go where your pull cord is. So remember, we got our 2 wires here. That we're going to have to connect. We got 1. We got 2. Now we're just going to tuck our wires. Make sure they're all tucked up in there. And then hold it in place. Get our holes lined up. So we can get our screws in. We got 2. We got 1 more. Make sure they're good, tight. Okay. All right. Now that we got them all tight, the only thing left to do, go turn our switch back on so we can test it. So if we've done it correctly, our light should work, and then our fan should work. Both are looking good, no clanking. So we are good to go. Same as always, make sure we get everything cleaned up, get the customer's approval, and discuss that survey.